All right, let's check this out. It looks like my mic's peaking a little. How is my guest? If you'd like to introduce yourself, and I can check the levels when we're doing that.
Oh, hey, I guess, yeah, welcome. I'm Mike with Catalytic Comics and creator for Petra Patriot. Also out there on Twitter and also on Substack, where I've got my mailing list where we do a lot of early releases of our art. And if you want to check me out, you can also check me out at Global Comics.
Killers, yeah. Okay, we're doing good. I'm still peaking a little bit, but you're doing good, which is great. Howdy, and thank you so much for joining me. We've got one more panelist who should show up, hopefully within like maybe next half hour. I'm hoping sooner than that, but we will see. But we're going to be talking.
We will see.
Yeah, we will see. He's going to show up. I'm just not sure when. We'll just kind of chat, hang out a little bit, but we will be eventually talking motivation in comics. You know, what keeps you moving forward, what inspires you, what motivates you. So I'm excited for that. I'm Cody. Uh,
Hmm.
with IronVerse Comics, bringing you the best of the Weird Space West. And you can check us out, ironversecomics.com. If you're here, you're pretty aware of the work. We don't get too many new travelers through here, but if you are new, best place to check us out is ironversecomics.com. Free reads, all kinds of great stuff. And yeah, I just want to thank Mike here for joining me. This one feels a little last minute. It wasn't so much, but things have been odd. I've been wanting to do these bi-weekly. It hasn't happened, so we're rescheduling them to monthly, and hopefully that means we will always consistently hit them. That's my goal. It's my hope, and hopefully that'll also work to motivate it. So yeah, howdy, howdy, everybody. Howdy, howdy. All right.
Howdy. Yep. And that's right, because yeah, I know I've done one of these before with you, and it's always been a lot of fun. And yeah, looking forward to talking about motivations.
Killer. And of course, anybody in chat has any questions or such as we're going through this, and especially as we're buying a bit of time, I would greatly appreciate it. But yeah, Mike, what have you been up to lately? Why don't you tell the folks? And if you have access to the chat and love to link your work, I'd love to see it linked so folks can kind of get in contact and check out what you do.
Sure. So I'll actually go over there and get on YouTube in just a second. I'll start engage with the chat. But yeah. So first thing is, yeah. Speaking of checking out, I did set up petropatriot.com to link to the Comic Con Global Comics. So that one's currently the Ashcan, which is it's gonna be the first 10 pages of book one. So if it's a sci-fi action, so as you know, in any good action movie, you have that opening sequence just to kind of set things up for the whole story, and that is what our Ashcan is. So what will happen is we have the main villain pursuing the hero, and we basically cut just before they land on top of him, so that things are set up just right for his introduction. As far as the main book goes, we're only 5 pages out on illustration now, so we're in the editing phase for that book. Just getting all the last plot pieces tied up as we draw out the concluding pages, and I've got to tell you, it is a lot of fun when you see it all come together.
Oh my God, I know how
It,
that goes. That's one of the best parts. My best part is once it reaches the readers and folks. But second to that, especially
Mhm.
as a writer, seeing it manifest into a visual is just incredible.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you the other part about it too is trying to be how do I say this? But also when you go back and you're trying to like tie together all the plot threads and there's things that you didn't realize even like even though it's like okay I've got my whole story mapped out right and I've got my plot mapped out but then you start to realize like as you're looking at that dialogue one more time it's like actually there's still a little bit more we can do here and bringing in those pieces to take it over the top it is a lot of fun and I do know I had some people I've been showing this to locally, and they're really excited about it, and I'm really excited to show it. So, I will say, yeah, if you do check out my Twitter profile or catalyticcomics.substack.com, you will see some updates coming very soon on how progress is going, and we are also now starting to work out when the campaign date will be. So,
Oh,
Yeah.
killer. Oh, no, get on that mailing list if you're interested. Definitely, once links can hit chat, check those out, see if the work is for you. I appreciate my chats with Mike. I can tell he's very, very passionate. He works with some incredible artists, and I'm excited to see what comes of the work. Very much so. Uh, on our end here at IronVerse Comics, we've been continuing to fulfill issue number 4. We have fulfilled 1 through 4 completely domestically, and we're working towards international. There have been some slip ups and such going that way, so we're working at it. We're recovering. It's taking some time. Um, and I'm excited for what things are in the future. But if folks want to check out again what we do, we are also in Global Comics. Very much appreciate those folks over there and what they do for digital comics and just creators and readers alike. And 1 through 3, as well as Cactus Coyote, are available for free to read over there, so you can see kind of what we're doing. And we will, once we get into the main chat, kind of talk about what motivates me. And one of those things is why I write, and you can see that hopefully very clearly in the work. So if you check it out, of course, if you notice that, if you see it, if you pull something from the work, I very much appreciate hearing about it. Can't ever hear enough thoughts about the work, positive, negative, what have you. Feedback is crucial, and it just that motivates me. It just drives me forward.
Yep, absolutely. Also, gotta say too, in addition to what motivates us to make the comics, also on the flip side, the comic also motivates you to do so many other things in life as well. I'm sure you've noticed when you started creating, you realize how much you don't know as you're starting to like draw it into existence with your characters and your story, right?
Oh, so much so. So I'm lucky, and I'm sure you found this out as well, especially just as a writer
Mm-hmm.
working, going towards a visual medium. Man, my artist reworked character designs and things that were impractical, or had to show me, how he thinks about layouts and things like that when I first started. Now we've hit a pattern by issue 4. There's not so much of that communication. We understand how to work with each other quite well. But at the beginning, he did so much to teach me how to work in a visual medium. He started in, well, he didn't start. He started with children's illustration, so that's got its own rhythm and pattern, right? But then he moved into doing storyboards for film and for television, and so he's got that kind of vibe behind him as well. So he had to show me why he makes choices, and once I understood why, then I understood how much I needed to just let him do what he needs to and adjust as it goes, because that's gonna lead to a clearer, more powerful, and just more striking version of what I originally had in mind. And that's just the wonderful bit of making this a collaborative art and enjoying that part of it. That's I guess what let's get to motivation, because that is one of the things that I love too, is that back and forth motivates me to improve, to continue, to see more, to share it, and again, hearing from folks who then see it. It's a very powerful self-feeding cycle of let's keep making comics. I love it.
Yeah, and one example, even just today, I was actually at a weightlifting competition,
Oh,
and yeah, no, it's yeah, man. Actually, lifting is fun. Both doing it and then also like seeing people who've like really got it down, how
mm,
they do it. But also too, what is it? Anytime you like walk into a gym, you can also kind of pay attention to like there's like so many different like ways the gyms are built. There's so many different ways that they are laid out, and it can depend on the program. It can depend on what their business model is. Now, my wife, she's competitive actually in the world of CrossFit. We've gone to a few competitions together. Um, and also, yeah, lots of great action photography for that. But it was interesting to see like you can kind of see like people who are just starting up, and it's essentially just a garage with some like equipment laid out in it versus the corporate gyms, which are all machines for some reason. And then also to just the place we were at was really pro. You had like individual lanes even for the different types of workouts, the way the racks are set up, and it's all about. And again, it was all about noticing,
mm,
right? And that's something that a comic helps you to do, because then I do that and then I turn around and it's actually caused me to really critique anytime you see strongman art, especially
Mhm.
like you'll see the ones with like She-Hulk like lifting a whole lot of weights. And there's some people who do that really well, and then they make it look like, yeah, like this is a superhero doing like crazy amounts of weight. But then there's some people it's like, man, like if she didn't have superpowers, she would be injured right now.
Yep. So I've got that from a different perspective because I became kind of hyper aware of that style noticing due to gun culture. Right, just the
Oh
concept
man,
of yeah. Again, trigger finger. That one is just
the
terrible.
trigger discipline.
Trigger discipline is just terrible in basically all artistic mediums, and when somebody actually pays attention to it, it adds that extra bit of character to that character, and of course the creative team and all of that. But it helps me flow into it a lot more, particularly if you're doing military or police style books, and it's not just kind of a goofy fun science fiction or something. That extra bit of attention to detail that always can either bring me further or pull me out of a story. It can motivate me to continue reading or de-incentivize me to do it because oh, okay, well you're handling this big serious thing, but you can't even really involve yourself in the technique, which is kind of what you were talking about as well of that actual form, right? As you also used. Uh, so yeah, that's a big
Yep.
one.
And when you mention that, I gotta ask about guns. What do you think about in comics when people do dual wielding? You know, I'm talking about like two guns at once.
Kimbo, yes. It depends. So I know a few folks in particular who just hate it. Like it's the dumbest thing in the world to them, and it really pisses them off. For me, depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a serious science fiction gun or serious like grounded, realistic noir or something story, works for like something like Max Payne. But then that's kind of again they crank it up to 10, right? It's part of the vibe that they're going for. It's just another color in the palette for that kind of storytelling. But if you're also going
That's true.
gritty and grounded, not so much, right? It's another thing that can pull you really out of it. So if you're writing a comic
Oh,
where or creating a comic where the trigger discipline wouldn't pull me out, then Akimbo also won't pull me out. But the same goes. If you're writing one where the trigger discipline would, then Akimbo certainly would. It's just that's
yep.
not a thing. It looks cool, it's stylish, but it would never it does not work. Your less dominant hand just cannot handle that. Even if you were ambidextrous, it's just not how it works physically in reality.
Not to mention trying to maintain like a double sight picture, which reminds me,
It's
do
impossible.
do you remember the Green Hornet movie way back when that one came out?
The Seth Rogen one,
Yeah, the one that had what was it? You had
I
like
haven't seen
the
it for
Blazowski
years.
character,
Okay, yeah.
and he had the gun that could split in two directions at once.
Oh yes. Okay, yeah. I think I remember that goofiness. Yeah.
Yeah,
So again,
when it's goofiness, it's fun,
yeah.
but yeah, when I remember thinking about that, like, man, how do you aim that thing?
Well, I've also seen so the one that's really kind of funny that I've seen. I don't remember where I saw it, but um, it's a Desert Eagle that is two barrels mounted to one. I forgot what that's called. They sell it,
Hmm.
all of that. Like, if you're gonna go akimbo, at least that one you're putting two barrels from the same sight picture. It's not gonna hit where you're aiming directly, but it's enough, right? It would work. It's stupid, and it's still like one kick of that is more than enough. But at least that kind of makes sense in that bit. And if you're going goofy, but you want a little bit of grounded, that kind of works better than akimbo. but and especially since they actually do sell the sucker, it's I don't know. I think comics again as like an artistic medium shouldn't be limited by anything but the imagination. But then you got to have style, flair, direction, and understand what you're doing with it to execute it well. You can have the greatest imagination, but you can execute it poorly. And these little bits of it is just what colors you're choosing to paint with, what vibes you're going for, and that. I could so if we're talking about the weightlifting though, I could see that one if I was in that culture and involved, and I had involved that physical form, I could see pulling me out even more than say trigger discipline would, because it is that movement, right? It is actually part of how they do these things. It's almost like I don't know, having the Punisher or somebody jump off of a skyscraper and land fine, right? Some normal guy. It can look stylistic and stuff, but then you're totally breaking the vibe. So
Yep.
yeah, I could see that, especially when it's physical movement. I'm sure there's plenty of folks who really enjoy parkour who have seen parkour in so many different like mediums. That's just like that's not how this works, and that's terrible, and it just grinds their gears, right? Uh, so yeah, I
I
don't
was gonna
know.
say now when you mentioned parkour, now I'm thinking about like the parkour fail videos, which is its own almost a genre.
Yes, so much so because it was a vibe for a while, and a lot of people who should be doing it decided, yeah, let's do that. It's fun, and they started doing jackass
Yeah,
content instead, and didn't really realize it. Um, but
yeah,
yeah,
because when you mentioned that, even for like lifting correctly, it takes a lot of practice just with an empty bar before you can like start to like really put weight on.
mhm.
But otherwise, like you'll get up to like an intermediate amount and then you'll injure yourself because it happens. It happens a lot, and I think parkour is the same way. It's like what was that movie, Karate Kid?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Right, the whole like waxy on, waxy off, and he's like, do this 500 times, and like then we can talk about
yeah. Yes, yeah. No,
the
you work
flying
up
drop
to it.
kick.
Yeah, a lot of people,
Yep.
again, your imagination exceeds your reality, and actually working towards that. I guess this is kind of motivation, right? You have
Yeah,
this
yeah.
lofty goal, you have this imaginary in anything that you wish to improve yourself towards. This would be, you have this like, this is who I want to be in this specific skill set, right? And so you have that idea, but since you haven't actually like dove into it, I'm also a musician, right? So we can approach it from that way as well.
Oh yeah.
You think you could do this, you think you could be on stage and do all these things, and then you actually pick up the instrument, right? Or you start lifting, and it's like, okay, this is easy. You pick up something easy. You're just I don't know, hitting a conga one note at a time. It's like, okay, I can do that. And then you pick up a drum set, and then you don't know what the hell you're doing, right? There's a lot more tools to work with. A lot of people pick up the bass, and I'm a bassist, thinking, "Oh, well, I can't play guitar, but I can play this."
I was gonna say for fun, I've done like some harmonica,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and you're right. That's another one too. Like it's not too hard to pick up, but like to do it really really well, there's a lot to it.
And so that's the bit too. So you have your this imaginary who you will be is your motivators. It's the carrot on the stick, but then you face the reality of making the thing, and bring back to comics, making a comic, and then your feet hit the ground. You're in the trenches, and that imaginary bit suddenly has perspective to it. And so I
Hmm.
guess what in any of these things, just let's talk in general because I think that's probably going to be the easiest. In any of these things, get you to stay in that trench, and not even that, hop into no man's land and then continue forward. What are some things for you that'll do that? In comics in general, if we could, but honestly, just period. Let's talk about motivation.
Yeah. So look, I mean, look as far as comics go, I know last time when we were in here and just asked the question, why are we in this? Or like,
Mm-hmm.
why did I get into this? And a big part of it was just, hey man, like, there were stories I wanted to tell. And it's gonna be a lot more engaging than just like trying to like write it out in nonfiction. So I said, hey man, like, let me let me draw someone kind of aspirational, let me write someone aspirational. And like let's start telling those stories, right? And of course, right, you get into it, then you start learning how to do it. And there is there are kind of two things that happen at the same time. One of them is of course the Dunning-Kruger effect, in which, hey, like if you're good at other things, it's like surely I'll be good at this too. It's like no you're not, right? So there's a lot of that. Then on
Yes.
the flip side though, you can also have the imposter syndrome, which will paralyze you and make you not want to go forward. And I, so in terms of like getting through both of those, I think one thing that people have told me, I think this is now quite true, is you got to do some small experiments first. You got to in some cases that even means like just doing like the one shots, as they'll say, before you write your like big epic story. And I do see the value to that. Um because if you kind of like mess up initially, like it's okay. You retool and you do it again. And you keep going until you start to write things that people have said, man, it's like, man, I really like that. Like I want to see this. Like when is this book coming out, Mike? Um And I'll tell you, like, it actually took me, I'd say, a couple of tries before people started saying that, and this is what's getting me excited now for our first full book coming out.
That's there's a lot of great stuff there. So for me, right, there's that when you face that no man's land, and there's you'll face it again and again in any artistic medium or any skill set, right? In fact, you won't be improving if you're not again hitting that space that's a little spooky and you're not 100% sure what's going on and how to progress until you figure it out, and it takes time. With comics too. So when you first start looking, I know when I first started looking to do them, and it's still the same advice even I would give people, which is it sucks. It's not good advice for somebody who doesn't have a perspective on the medium, but it's truth. So that's the good thing about it is that if you want to break into comics or to make comics, the only way to do it is to do it, and that sucks. I hate that phrase, but it is so true. The only way to actually get a comic done is to do it. There's no actual rigid way or structure to manifest this thing, and that is terribly demotivating unless you have a stronger guiding star, stronger goal to walk towards. And for me, it
Yeah,
was
so
was
let's talk about pouring.
yeah.
Yes, let's pour some gasoline on that fire, right?
Okay, okay.
that that internal fire of the heart, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the bit is that and again you could have a tiny little spark, and this is interesting, and then you find consistently when I started out at least, I was trying to figure out like how do you do this, like how do you talk to an artist, how do you meet all these things, how do you do this, how do you make comics. Again and again I came across articles that just said, well, you make comics, and it's so frustrating. That was just water on that little spark, right? But I was lucky that my spark wasn't quite like a match. It was more of like a torn circuit with a lot of juice sparking, so it just kind of I was like, okay, fine, like what does that mean? So I found paths forward for me until something actually fit and found traction, and then that motivates you when you find a small success. And that's a big part of motivation as well, is having proper perspective on your successes and your failures. Allows motivation to survive and to breathe and to thrive if you allow it. Again, yeah, you mentioned imposter syndrome, that's a great one, but there's a lot of disincentivizing there's losses that can happen again and again in so many different ways, no matter what medium or goal you're heading towards. But keeping keeping your grand perspective, your original initial spark, and feeding it and guiding it where it can actually thrive, sometimes takes patience and takes will, and hopefully again that motivation, that grand goal, what I refer to as a guiding star, will keep you on track as long as you keep moving. But I've seen so many folks, they hit wall after wall after wall, and eventually they give up. And sometimes that's because it's not something they are adapting to. That's a big one. A lot of people say, well, I've done this and this and this, and nothing's worked, and it's basically the same thing again and again, and they don't really realize that. They haven't pivoted, or they don't have patience, and that's a big one, and they don't see instant results, and that can be what I want to say dismotive, but that's not. So I'm going to keep using disincentivizing.
Demotivator, yeah.
That could be a demotivator. Thank you. And
Yeah.
that that's a pity in a lot of cases, because I think everybody's voice deserves to be heard, because you started this for a reason. There's something there that you wanted to, but you weren't willing to adapt to how you could do it. And that's a big one in comics, is there's, again, they tell you, mentioned it, the only way to do it is to do
Well, I'll
it,
tell you
and
what.
that's because it takes so many different forms for so many different creative teams.
Yep. And I'll tell you, yeah, Liz has a question here,
Ooh.
and yeah, this is a good question because actually, this is something David and I go back and forth on a lot. In fact,
So Liz
so
says, how
this,
much creative input do you guys think an artist should have over a project versus the writer? So I have something great to say
yes,
about that, but let's let Mike tackle it first.
yes, let's say this. So I work with David Schmeling, so that's Brolonks on Twitter. So I'll actually have to drop a link to his real quick. He is a great guy.
Agreed.
Just great guy to work with. He also is working on his own comic, Forlorn Knights, which will be coming out pretty soon. So also have to promote that because he's been showing me some stuff, and that looks like a really fun kind of manga-ish or Euro manga style comic. And as some people say, it's like Berserk, but like a lot more friendly, if that makes sense. But I'll say this much: I have enjoyed that story so much reading it. Now, now on this question. So what happens here is it really depends on who initiates this project. In a sense, like whose project is it? And so sometimes you have an artist who knows there's a certain kind of story they want to tell, but like they don't have all the specifics on dialogue, and they bring in a writer to help them. A very common case in comics, and this is my case, is I wanted to do that. I'm the writer, and I brought an artist onto the team to do that. And so in this case, depending on whose project it is, they may have the first say, they have the veto power, right? Because it's their project. At the same time, I do think it's good to be open both to critique and to feedback or ideas as time goes on. And especially as the writer, there are a lot of small things you may not realize about the character design or about small details. One thing, especially that David helped me with, is he had me look over like various hand gestures or facial expressions he would give specific characters. And these are kind of small things, but it takes what is otherwise like just a generic character concept and it makes them a lot more personable and unique. And as a writer, like I would never even know to ask for such a thing. And so in that sense, like that is how the artist will help you. At the same time, both of you have to also get a shared vision of who these characters are. And if you are the lead creator, it is your job to set that tone and that vision and not have like two split visions because like that also creates conflicts and then also nobody really knows what the story is. So that's my take on this.
So for me, and I agree with all of those points. I would just add the caveat: it's going to be different for every creative team, and I'll explain why. For me, for instance, I've been working with Maxi Dallo for nearly a decade now, and so we found
Yeah.
that pattern very quickly, and the mutual respect developed very quickly as well. In fact, I think that's why our initial meeting he signed on is and for the rate that he suggested and such because of the respect for the idea and what we were trying to do. And also
Mhm.
probably because he needed the paycheck. But we've what I found out very quickly is that I have my guiding star, my goal. What's motivating me to create comics is not a rigid expression of ego, which I see a lot of in comics. And it can be great. It can be great. It can work for people. I don't say that negatively. For me, though, it's more of manifesting these thoughts and these ideas for a greater collective. That's what the character is designed for. So it's the whole concept and basis of the character. So having a collaborative team that puts their input and their flavor to it wasn't only like something I had to understand and wrangle, but it was a necessity. It was needed 100%, and I recognized that very quickly. Particularly as processes moved and crowdfunding makes it even more collaborative with your micro investors, right? And it becomes this greater beast for me that is just at the core of why I even started the character as an idea that I needed to play with in my head. For folks who are unaware, Jack Irons is a reincarnated immortal, and that's kind of goofy. A lot of people don't latch on to it because of its kind of esoteric bit. But what that meant to me, right, is that I'm saddling the weight of human history on somebody who can no longer leave participating in it, right? Eventually he had all these different reincarnations, all these different lives throughout history, all that weight of remembrance of what humanity is attached to eventually a life that he cannot like step away from it and start again. He's stuck with this, he's stuck with these memories, he's stuck being this person throughout all these different things. And then I collide that against a bunch of different what did I call them? They're caricatures of these struggles that we have to deal with, like Four Horsemen, which even originally they're caricatures of that kind of. But how I did it is very directly. They are just they're personas and caricatures of greater ideas to segment them and allow them to be explored via this wide human perspective, and that allows so much maneuverability for me as the writer creator working with any team, particularly with the team I've been able to, but I've worked with a lot of different individuals on this greater project, IronVerse Comics, and the adaptability and maneuverability of that is one of my motivating factors. And so I want as much input from readers, from the creative team, from peers. I want those inputs because that's the point of the work I do. That's not going to be the goal of every creative team. In fact, I'd say that is a very outlying goal. A lot of people have very specific visions that they need to manifest. I work with people who have specific visions that need to be manifested. Our project called Cactus Coyote, it's very specified. And I can say that because of how much he's written for it and how he's constructed it. Dollar Coins, a co-founder, co-editor over here at IronVerse. He has a very direct vision. In fact, he storyboards everything as the writer before the other artist takes it at all. So he set up the shots, he set up the dialogue, he set up everything, and then the other guy just applies their style to it, basically, just to allow it to be a little bit more refined than his artistic abilities allow. And night and day kind of creators. I prefer to flow. He has his steps that he's built that he wants to walk along, right? And so I would say it's different for every team, but it should have a clear, unified vision, whether that's from a larger top-down perspective like I do, or if it's from a bottom-up perspective like a lot of other creators do. It's important that there is most certainly something clear and it's not muddied. And there's a lot of ways that can manifest, and a lot of different dynamics that can manifest within the creative team. And as long as it actually works and your readers are satisfied and you're making a work you can be proud of, I think that's the proper amount of input, artist versus writer. But again, if you're paying for it and you have a very specific vision, that's how it should go. Like, period. That's just how it works. That's how any collaborative art where you hire on a freelancer should work. They shouldn't feel entitled to a massive amount of creative control. So it depends, but feel it out.
It depends on the relationship and on the scope as well. If this is someone you're going to collaborate with over multiple books, clearly there's a relationship there. And the one thing that'll come up, because it's a little bit different field, but like I'm a web developer by trade.
Oh, there you go.
And occasionally I will get cases of clients asking for features that I just want to tell them in advance, like, hey man, it's not going to help you that much, and it's going to be incredibly expensive to do, and you're probably going to regret asking for this. But then some people say will still say like, I don't care, do it anyway, right? And And there are some cases where, in that case, we'll just say, okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. In other cases, we'll say, hey, like, let's work out what you really need, and like, let's get that done. And so I do think you're right. Like, there is a balance of both being humble enough to say that if someone says, hey, man, like, I care about your project, I really think it should go I really think you should try this. Right, listening to that and like working out collaboratively can create some very interesting things. Sometimes things that are better than you expect originally. And but at the same time too, also, right, everyone also gets ideas, and sometimes like those ideas are not actually that valuable, and so it's really like it is this like constant both sides learning from each other, and really again we're developing a shared vision so that so at the end of it we both say like, hey man, like we both made something way better than we first thought at the beginning.
One thing I will mention too between a writer and artist, right, is a writer, and now this isn't all writers, but writers in general will spend significantly less time structuring the script of a page than an artist will actually drawing that page, right? So they spend
Yes.
often spend significantly more time actually feeling out the flow and the designs and what things are going to feel like. And this includes the colorist on top of that, right? We've worked with some wonderful
Hmm.
colorists, and their application of the lighting to something black and white is, if they do it wrong, they can ruin that vision that somebody already spent a lot of time putting that vision that somebody had already written and spent a deal of time on. I know comic scripts, and you'll see from different folks. They are often. I say this, and this isn't 100% true, but it's like 99% true. I haven't seen two comic scripts from two different writers ever structured the same. And that usually is because the collaborator they work with, and you'll see also in mainstream a lot of writers work with the same artists again and again because they have that pattern. They have the ability for their script to be understood and translated, and they've already felt that out, and they know how that dynamic's going to work. Um, you'll see like an Alan Moore
By the way,
script is writing a novel, whereas a Garth Ennis script is kind of how I structure it, where it's just like, here are the main bullet points in the setup of the scene, and then the artist builds that. I prefer that, but some folks have a very clear vision, and they really want to make sure that that is directly communicated. And
and I'll tell you what. Also, I got a question for you as we're doing
yeah,
this. Um, this is also on like, because this is also something that's actually like came up from a specific page you were coloring recently. Have you ever spent time when you look at a scene thinking about how the scene smells?
a little bit. It's mainly when I'm walking through the structure of it. I will. So when the
Yeah.
writing process is going through, I'll think of smells, sights, anything that will add to each scene, each note I'm trying to hit as I'm building a script. I try to be very precise with it, even if it's kind of a bridging one where it can be a little bit looser and less precise because it just needs to flow from one to the other less than it needs to be that thing. But I try to inhabit the characters as directly as possible, and I write from the best I can in at inhabiting those characters to give them life, and to allow, I like to say one of my better traits is empathy, and so I try very hard to inhabit those beings and to guide them towards the
Hmm.
experiences I wish to communicate, but guide them so they're still walking that path. So smells, sights, temperature, lighting, all those things are important to the
Yep.
communication of those tones. And those, again, I keep using the term colors, but I mean it more as a uh, you could use the term notes again, as I use that as well. It's a specific resonance that you're trying to communicate, usually emotionally, right? Um, when you're walking that, and so I'll build that, but again, once it gets the line art, it could be structured very differently. I tend to rewrite the script to the line art eventually. Usually there's very few adjustments, but there are always adjustments that allow for better pacing, allow for a scene to have been set up differently to still communicate what I need it to. And then the colors on top of it. I know my Maxi Dallo, our line artist, he is always in direct contact with the colors because he has very specific visions of the colors, and they actually tend to clash with what I like. I like the vibrant colorists that I work with. I like that extra bit of surreal, dreamlike quality that vivid colors in this darkness apply to it. While he does like his more grimy, grungy earth tone vibes when he colors his own things. And so there's this back and forth where he feels that out with Steve, who we worked on for the past 3 issues. Steve Cannon,
Oh
wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful artist. So there's that back and forth, but I still like I work with Steve very specifically because of his choices. So there's a back and forth where it's like, well, this was way too bright, and it kind of muddies the idea I had for the scene. He'll communicate that to him. Whereas sometimes I've had to do that for like, oh well, this hologram isn't bright enough. It's not communicating what it needs to, or this was this. Would you change it to this color? I've had to do that a few times, but it's very minuscule in the grander scheme of things. But
Yep.
smells. Yeah, that's a big one. But it's more of, it just adds for me to generalize the, got to use the terms like tone or color, the feeling of panel to panel, honestly, is what it is. Like, if there's going to be an overwhelming smell. For instance, I'm a huge Daredevil fan. Smells are massively important if you're writing Daredevil. that's what I love about that is the extra sensory heightened perception. That's why I love Daredevil. A lot of people, it's different things,
Yep.
but for me, Daredevil, if an author understands that when they're writing him, then that's the story I love. That's why I read him. Right, is for those things.
Yep.
And smell is a massive component of his personality and his experience and his story. It's less so in Jack. It's also important in
Yep.
Wolverine. It's important in werewolf stories. It's important in a lot of different things where that's a main component. That's where you should bring it
I
to the
was gonna
front.
say, and then and I was gonna say, what was it? If you've ever heard of Chuck Palahniuk, that was the guy who wrote Fight Club. So
Oh,
he
okay.
actually has a blog out on Substack that I followed for a little while, and he had a series of books he recommended writers to read, and one of them was Campfires of the Dead and Living.
Okay.
And and yeah, part of the reason I brought up that question is I remember that particular author. He does this really incredible job of your like making, even though it's all words, you can feel everywhere that you are in that story. And this is everything from like a story about like a homeless guy who's like walking out on the street and you can smell the asphalt that's just like baking, and you can also kind of like feel the mangy dogs walking around. And then then he gets into this trash can. My goodness, like the description of that trash can was so gross. um and of course this is what makes comics fun, is like you can also add pictures to it, but like you can then imagine senses beyond that. And I think, and again, this is like for like a motivation inspiration thing, is that again, like once you start doing this, like you do start to get this like heightened like noticing of the world of like what things am I walking past that look visually interesting that I didn't notice before. It's even stuff like I've been like to an airport and I saw this like unusual way that this like system of elevators worked, that it was all on the inside. You could actually see like a little like box they had created for the workers. But I'm like, you could totally do like a double decker elevator. Like that'd be a fun sci-fi concept. And and you just again you start noticing things like that.
Oh, I
And then it's a
agree.
question like, then yeah, how do I represent this in my story?
Well, that's
Like,
always great. Well, I think that's the constant search. We can talk specifically writers, but artists in general is to communicate their experiences, and to do that, observation is key. Um, I can't tell you how many authors, from Stephen King to Terry Pratchett, so many others. A lot of their basis of communication was observation. They spent more time, not more time, but they spent a significant amount of their time outside of writing, thinking about how to write. And in that perspective, you're observing what's around you, a lot more detail. For me also, I've spent the last about 7 years working with dogs, so scent has been a big part of like how you communicate with them and what's going on with them and how you understand and can more emphasize with them. And so if that helps bring a reader in, that's great. If you're writing a story about a dog and you're not including a lot of scent, you are mistaken. Um, but there's the places for these things. It really does depend on what your work's trying to communicate, right? And what your overall goal is. And for me, yeah, that can be a motivator because you got this heightened awareness and you're seeing things more and more. For me, it's more about how I, in general, not just art, right? So observation's been key in my life, just how I'm built, how I understand, socialize, network, create. All these things are built on observation and empathy, and so I've kind of, that's just part of my daily life bit. And then you can go into spirituality and how that can affect you and what you see and how that could be a communication with a greater power, all of those things. But at the end of the day, if you can put it into your art and it resonates with others, that is a hell of a motivator. It feels good. It is a art is the bridge, is the attempt to communicate something, at least for me in a lot of cases, the attempt to communicate something that perhaps words alone or even words themselves could communicate but don't communicate as precisely or as wonderfully. And for me, that's a massive motivator when that succeeds. And just the attempt to do it is a massive motivator for me as well, because there's the potential for it to succeed.
And I noticed you mentioned like empathy and spirituality, and that's a book I had been reading. This is Leisure: The Basis of
Ah, there we go.
Culture by John Piepper. I'll put a link up to that in just a moment. But that was actually one of the points that he made, that what he called leisure, some of us might also call it creative work or intellectual work. It actually starts from worship. And one thing I have noticed, especially in a number of indie titles, you can actually really get a window into the heart of somebody when you see what they create. And I see we have Brett has just come on.
Oh, howdy,
Brett,
howdy. There we go. Okay, let me reorganize
hey
this
Brett.
pictures. Welcome, Brett. Thank you so much for joining us. We were long awaiting you, but I'm so glad you showed up.
Sooner had I not gotten held up.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. Thank you so much. We've actually been having a good chat anyway without you, so you're just going to make it better.
So you say.
I do say. I did say. It's been said.
Yep. Yeah,
Cool.
like we were just getting off yeah, now you're getting the icons pushed around there. Yeah, Brett, like something we were just talking about is the idea that creative work actually can also have a kind of a spiritual or empathetic component to it. And you can actually see in a lot of works, like you do write from the heart. And what that means is that if you're going to try to write a heroic character, you either need to be or know someone who has those kind of qualities to really be able to understand it. If you want to write relationships to some extent, like you need to understand them, either be in one or know people in one. And in effect, like you can kind of see like if someone doesn't have the right heart, like it comes out in some of these stories.
I've come across many individuals like that, particularly in mainstream comics, and even more so as time goes on and they stay in it and what their work becomes. It's kind of it's a trip. Eric Larson, but
I like
nonetheless.
that one with what was it, the Supergirl who's just like sitting there eating a cupcake and talking about her feelings for the entire book.
Well, that's a whole genre in itself. They've been chasing slice of life without actually committing to it or doing anything for a long time. But let's have Brett, if you would. I would really appreciate
Yeah.
it to introduce yourself and to kind of talk about your work for a minute or two. And then I think the spirituality note is actually a great chance to get into Changeling a little bit and talk about your kind of vibes and what motivates you to create that title. But if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
All right, yeah, sure. So, yeah, those who don't know me, hi, my name is Brett McGowan. I am the writer-creator of Changeling and Urban Fairy Tale, which is a urban fantasy kind of inspired by multiple things, like, well, probably the thing that's going to stand out to most people is anime and manga, but if the title didn't give it away, it's also very inspired by folklore of the British Isles. That's my heritage. Uh, it's also got components that came from my own life, like not either me or people that I knew growing up. And I'm also a co-owner of the Mythoverse, which is the publisher that Changeling is under. And we got other comics in the works, not just Changeling, but that's that's for another show, I think.
Oh yeah, no, but do check out Mythoverse. You just type in Mythoverse in Google, and I'm pretty sure it's the first result, which was very smart of these individuals. It's a wonderful shared universe, a bunch of very passionate, incredible storytellers under it. I've been a fan and a friend for a good chunk of time, and I've been blessed to be
Yeah.
one.
Yes, I will tell you, if you try YouTube search, you will get three different channels called Mythoverse.
Uh-oh.
One that dabbles in Hindu mythology, and another that I think is a music channel.
Oh, I was wrong. I was wrong. Don't listen to
Oh
me.
no, Oh, look, don't worry.
Mhm.
You'll know which one is ours.
Very, very true. But I'm sure you got a bunch of free reads up on Global Comics as well. So if you guys go to Global Comics, type in Mythoverse, you will find a bunch of their wonderful works and a bunch of different titles in terms of tone and what they're going for as well. So it's a great place to check out that stuff. But yeah, Brett, we've been talking about what motivates us through comics, and as Mike had said, we kind of hit this tone of that personal guide. I've been talking about it throughout, what I call my guiding star. You know, why what I'm heading towards, and why I keep walking towards it even if I gotta crawl. Do you have anything with that with your work in Changeling or just in general?
Well, initially when I first started it, it came from a place of failure to launch. I had tried making comics before and just could never get a project off the ground. Like, it just wouldn't get past me just writing at most maybe a character bible and some plot outlines. Could never, because I don't have I don't have the aptitude for the art. I can write, but without an artist, it's just words on a Google Doc, which that's might be cool to somebody, but that's not a comic book. For a while, I kind of consigned myself to the idea that maybe I just wasn't meant to be. Maybe God had a different idea in mind for me. And well, then about 5 years ago, uh, well, I'll just say it. About 5 years ago, Comicsgate happened, and that just we can bemoan what it turned into, but I'd be lying if I did not say it kind of kind of gave me kind of gave me a motivation a little bit. It's sort of it kind of
I
I
was
guess
gonna say it kind of promised like this new start for a lot of people, I think.
I
No,
suppose
I didn't
that would be good too. That'd be a good way to put
I
it. But
didn't come onto the scene until it was a little bit past peak. But that was the impression I got, that like it was kind of promising this new start, and like all these new indies were gonna rise up.
Mhm.
And some did, and then also some people just got too busy trying to turn it into their own personal movement. But
Yeah,
like that happens to every movement.
yeah, but yeah. Speaking for myself, just for me, I just saw a bunch of people trying to bootstrap comics up. At least that's how it looked to me at the time, and I just thought to myself, I'm working at Walmart. I don't think I've got anywhere else to go in life. And what have I got to lose? Why don't I just give it a shot? So
Hmm.
I met people like Cody through that same kind of Twitter space. I met people who became my collaborators like Victor and Rubbish, and that was that was Changeling. That was essentially how it got off the ground, and it was like, and the moment I got through that first issue, seeing it through to completion, I felt like I did. I felt like felt like there was a spark in me again. Like I felt like I had a second wind in life because making comics was something I had wanted to do since I was a teenager. I always
Mm.
it was and just now being able to say to myself, I actually am doing this. I am actually living a dream I've had since for so long, and I I just kind of gave me just kind of gave me a sense of fearlessness, I guess you could say, because now it's like,
Hmm.
how much further can I go with this? And then I met people like Matt and Dan. We formed the Mythoverse.
Hmm.
The rest is history.
Yeah, so for me, one of the big things, and if we do need to chat about CG for a second. The thing and the only thing that I've really liked about it, the only thing, is it was a massive door kick. It was loud and it brought a lot of eyes to it, and so it allowed me to get any visual traction, and I did not waste a second getting it. Beyond that, groupthink for me is it is the death of ideas. It's also the life of them, but it is the death because, again, it becomes co-opted and guided. There will always be a spear tip eventually instead of a wave, and waves are much more fluid, let's say. But that's been a bit, and I've seen a lot of great people be able to utilize those particular platforms to do their own thing and remain great people. Seen the opposite as well. But nonetheless, that was a slight motivator for me. I had started trying to get this more off the ground. I originally had a very low budget and found the artist myself, and we actually did the first issue ourselves. I lettered it. It was terrible. Never self-letter if you've never lettered before, unless you're practicing it, right? But not a nice piece of work. You will ruin it very quickly and maybe not even recognize it like I did. But nonetheless, it got it out there. I tried to get it online, and I did get it online and tried to get some views. Anybody who read it enjoyed it, but it's like, this lettering is terrible. In fact, we eventually a letterer found it. I was like, oh, this is really great. Please let me re-letter it. I was like, oh, okay, sure. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's see what it looks. And it was so much better, and that gave us a better footing. And then I eventually tried to crowdfund a second issue. I just wanted to do line art, right? I just wanted to crowdfund line art so I can just keep making comics, because what I saw in comics was the medium with the greatest potential to tell the kind of stories I wanted to tell. There is a very low bar for entry to comics compared to any other artistic medium, particularly when you have very large ideas, some that you don't even fully comprehend, right? Like just this big general vibe that you wish to communicate. And so that was one of those bits. But eventually there was a door kick, and there were people looking for indie comics, and there were angry folks who wanted this and that and wanted something different, and there's no kind of energy quite like anger. And so it was wonderful to be able to then present that crowd something artistically viable. But before I was able to do that, I tried running a crowdfunding campaign, and it got $10 over 2 months. And talk about a demotivator, right? It's like, okay, well, I just don't know what I'm doing. But eventually I joined social media, and the time I joined social media was around that time. And it allowed me to present quality to an audience that was looking for that. And so that was great, and allowed some traction and became a consistent motivator. It's like, oh, people actually like what I do. And there's nothing quite like a motivation. There's no motivation quite like people enjoying the work, particularly when it has these notes that are a bit, again, more esoteric than you'll find in a lot of media now. These definitely not popcorn food, right? It's not simple stuff that I was like engaging with, and that's what I love media comics. You can go from the goofiest, simplest, kind of ridiculous kind of story stuff all the way up to just some of the most intelligent breakdowns of amazing ideas and philosophies that have occurred outside of those amazing thinkers and their works. And so being able to find an audience for that was an incredible motivator, and the fact that audience has grown since, and I've been able to release these things. Comics is a specific form of magic that I just appreciate so very much, and it itself has been a consistent motivator, even though the industry and the vibe and the folks, you get a lot of good and you get a lot of bad. And it's that's just the journey, and as we were talking about spirituality, for me it's those little reminders, those little kicks of like these things lining up in a very specific way that you can't help but notice, that those have been the greatest motivator when you're, as I phrased again, you're in the trenches and you're looking over no man's land and you got to cross it again to get to the next step. That's the thing that gets you over that bump for me, and gets you through the oncoming fire and the barbed wire and the corpses and the smell and all the other nastiness that comes with the journey.
Yeah, speaking for myself, like trying to live out a dream was my motivation initially, but I think as time has gone on, things ha things have sort of changed for me because I think I've you probably remember me saying something to this effect that I did that Changeling has evolved to a point where I don't feel like it doesn't feel like like it's just my book anymore because Victor Rubbish and now Forrester, who's the book's letterer, like they've all added their own touches to it, and it's to me it feels like it belongs to them much as it does me, even though I technically am the owner of it. But
Mm-hmm.
it to kind of expand on that, now it's like it's not only just my book, not only their book too, it's also their dream as well because now I've brought on people who also believe in this, and so to if I was to call it quits, like to me, I'd be doing them dirty, and that's absolutely something that's not in my character. Like seeing this through isn't seeing this through isn't just me living out a dream. It's also kind of become a duty for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like that. There's nothing quite. Another great motivator is when you're able to pay wonderful people a good wage to do their art. Because art is one of those wonderful pursuits that is very hard to keep a career in. Just period. It doesn't matter what you're doing. There's so many people who have something to say. The competition is fierce and often dirty. The fact that you can do that is again a little piece of magic that is just so like for me, the fact that I've also helped
Now,
get them platforms to get other gigs and to continue to move forward with their careers has been one of my favorite things in this whole journey.
while that's true, there's also one caveat I would put towards that, which is what one thing I do see a lot that happens in the artistic space is you'll have this concept of the artist struggle. One thing I would point out here is also there is this idea of the difference between, say, like an artist and an illustrator, and further the idea that if you're doing this freelance, this is a business, and some of this you also do need to approach as a business, right? So because of course, yeah, for a lot of us, our comics do start off as dreams, and like it's something that we wanted to do for a long time, and we get into it. But there's also a point that you start to realize, like, okay, this is a business. This is in this case, an intellectual property product I'm making, and therefore, like, I need to start looking at this in terms of like, okay, who is my customer? My customer are the readers. Who are the people on my team that get this done? Like, these are my employees. And part of this also is to then say, like, okay, what is the smartest decision I can make around these things that does not let my emotion get too much in the way, right? Now it's never emotion free because look, it's art and it's also for a lot of us dreams that we started to do. But there can also be cases, even my own story, right? I still have for my Discord avatar the version one of my character, and where my story ended up was somewhere a little bit different. But that was also too, I just came to realize like, hey, like I had this seed, but then when I really started to understand like what the story could be and what people may want, it became something else. And I'll say this, I like what it became.
Well, that's the best way that can happen. I can tell you how many people bend over backwards to try and please an audience that they think they understand, and they get nowhere with it. So that balance is very key, and each project's going to land there differently. For me, it's far more towards what I need to do more than it is towards what other people want the thing to be. But because if I was doing the work that people wanted this to be, quote unquote, said they wanted it to be, or what they thought it was be going in, um, it would be uninteresting to me. It would be unfulfilling to me. It would not be worth my time or my artist's time. Um, people want people tend to want something far more vanilla than spicy, and with that, you got to find your
Mhm.
balance for it. For me, again, it would be terribly unmotivating to bend backwards for these things, but if you can twist or bend a little bit or how you feel you need to, and it allows not only greater success, but you find that you enjoy it more, then that is absolutely the correct decision. Um, and a Miyamoto Musashi quote: "Rigidity is the pathway to death. Fluidity is the pathway to life." Again, you need to adapt. But for me, again, it's I'm heading towards a very specific direction where too much adaptation to it, too much commoditization in particular, will completely fog that star, and I'll get lost and die. Like the concept will die on the vine. It will lose its heart and soul. So it's finding that balance. There's so many different balances in this. You need to treat it as business because again, you got to get those people their paychecks, particularly if you're working with freelancers and you're not yourself. If it's yourself, you got to eat. So that's a whole nother level of motivation, right? If you're a cartoonist and you're doing everything yourself, that's a whole nother level. And that's a great motivator. Survival. That is a massively great motivator. But it is the original motivator, in fact. But the fact is, for me, it's very important. I come across so many indie works that feel hollow to me because they have twisted too much to what they thought people wanted. And it lost this core to what like I was interested in, and as that can be as soon as issue 2. And it's just suddenly it's oh okay, you twisted too much. Now I twisted because of how I was trying to cram too much into one thing because I had so much to say of it, and that's just learning and refining, and I needed that critique and that outside input to recognize where I could grow. And I think that's a great way to see that. And I think that's for me, it's a wonderful motivator to continue forward, so I can show again, did I learn anything? Can I try again? Can I get that feedback back? Um,
Yep.
but
Yeah, because for indies, yeah.
but in general, again, like if I had listened
Mhm.
enough, it would have, it's like, oh well, you want this from this just because that's what it looks, and you didn't even read this thing. Like I had an investor contact me within I right after issue three's campaign. He's like, oh, love what you're doing. This is what I'm doing. I would love to invest and buy this, and this is what it would mean. And I looked at it, and it's like, you didn't even read the books because of how he was communicating what he wanted to do with it. Um, and that was one of those times where I was like, yeah, I could recognize that this was one of those lines that like I can't cross, even though it would have been financially viable, and I could have even maybe made it survive for a little bit in that new form that I wouldn't have enjoyed. Um, it really depends what you need. Again, for survival, that would have been a very smart choice on my behalf. But for longevity and for, as you're talking about, the artist versus the illustrator kind of bit for the business, who knows? For me, I think it was a good choice. I think it's what's going to allow me to continue to put these out. But for somebody else, or even for this project, it's still to be told. Who knows? Who knows what that choice will end up actually meaning? But I still am making the work that keeps me moving forward, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
and I think also too, there's kind of a calling here, and because this is the challenge I think for indie creators. So this was again, both imposter syndrome, but also the Dunning-Kruger effect. That we also had to be aware that there were professional standards that were set by the industry. The reason that we had a big two is because at the time, right back in what I would call the corporate age, if you are a talented creator, the great thing about working with corporations is you get access to corporate resources.
Yes.
And then that's back when these companies had more competent editors. They then said, "Hey, we're gonna help do all the work of assembling the team and such like this. If you're a writer, we want you to write to professional standards. If you're an artist, we want you to draw to professional standards." Right? Everyone was trying to strive to this high standard. And as you know, like then that started to change over time. And even Liz made the comment about people who did not have such good life experience then start also trying to do social commentary, and it goes off in these weird directions. And of course, this is the whole activist comics thing that has then started a number of indie movements. But for us as the indies, we also have to remember too that as we also strive towards professional standards and try to learn what those are, I think you also get motivation as you understand what you're doing more.
Oh,
I can
absolutely.
think
Absolutely.
I can
Again, you cross the horizon, then you see a new one. That can be a wonderful motivator. It can disincentivize as well. But for me, again, yeah, it's another mountain to climb, and I do appreciate being able to get that new perspective every time.
I
Hmm.
can I can think of two indie creators that completely just they completely really like had no professional standards, and yet they were very successful by every measure possible. And that would be James O'Barr with The Crow and
Yes. Yes.
Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yes, those are great
Yeah,
examples of
yeah,
passion, passion, drive, will, and then on Laird and TMNT, like intelligence and willing to adapt.
yeah,
Certainly, TMNT became something very, very different and relatively
yeah,
quickly. Um,
yeah. Although in the case of James O'Barr, like he's even said this, that The Crow was just it was therapy for him
oh,
because he
absolutely.
wrote it at yeah, he wrote that he worked on that like after his girlfriend got killed in a drunk driving accident.
You can fill it in
And
every bit. It's poetic. It's the most
No.
beautiful
yeah, well he did it
expression of
because
Yeah.
grief I've
and
ever
he's
read. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
wonderful.
and he
Super
said
helpful
like
for me.
yeah, he said he couldn't afford therapy, and like this was the only way he had to try to make sense of what he was going through, which is why the
Hmm.
comic can seem impenetrable on a first read. Like it's hard to relate. It's very hard to relate to. I am not going to deny that.
Wasn't for me, luckily, because again, it's experienced grief, and Jack was born out of grief as well, so I very much resonated with it and how he tackled it. It's not
No,
romantic love that I was dealing with, but it was love, and there's a very similar experience with grief and attachment and the loss there. I was a Punisher fan
no,
too, so the Crow's got those vibes, so it was kind of easy for me
yeah,
to dive in. But
yeah,
the artwork is rough.
yeah.
That's another one that's got kind of rough artwork. It's very stylistic, but it's rough.
Yeah, but like yeah, but like I said, the passion and like the sheer emotion and heart kind of came through. Like there were clearly enough people that this resonated with that someone ended up coming to him and said, "Hey, we want to make a movie out of this." And I guess at that point, I think O'Barr was sort of like kind of past, sort of like had begun to move on, heal from that death. And then, of course, we all know what happened with Brandon Lee, and I guarantee that did not do anything helpful for his mental health. That didn't, because I think like he ended up like giving away all the royalties he got off that movie. He didn't keep it at all, and I think he just sort of like ended up selling off the IP wholeheartedly.
Mm.
And to be fair, I think it's that was made in a very specific part of his life that he's clear. Like if you actually check out interviews that he's done recently, like he's in much better spirits. He's much happier. I think he got married. He's married again, and he has a kid. He's in a much better place than he was when he made The Crow, and he clearly doesn't need it anymore.
That's a bit, again, the
This
motivator
also.
was working through the grief, which
Hmm.
my number
Yeah.
one was a lot of that. I've done
Yeah.
paintings for that. I've done a lot for that. Art is a beautiful way to understand things as complex as emotions and very, very weighty ones. And that's, again, I love the Crow for that. It's the most beautiful expression of grief I've seen put to page. But the Duskquill here says working with corpse can be great for an indie. You get some resources provided, which honestly nowadays is not really the case. It's very rare publishers are doing much but trying to get you into stores. And even then, it's trying, and even then, stores buying indie is kind of rough when they have to choose between
Yeah.
60 Marvel titles and 60 or more the titles per the big two each, and then you've got some of the Image titles that are consistent from big creators that they know will sell. And so that ship, I would almost say, has sailed in terms of viability when you can just do it yourself. But that's a whole other thing. You have to take responsibility for your business and all these other things that are pretty scary to a lot of quote unquote artists.
At the same time, what you said also ties into what Eastman and Laird did with Ninja Turtles. Like, once it caught on, like, they wasted no time monetizing that IP.
Yes, no time at all.
You know, like, they knew, like, they just made something that they thought that was about, that on paper is sounds like it would be the stupidest thing possible.
It was a Daredevil
And even-
spin-off fan project, yeah.
and even they admitted it was partially born out of them watching bad TV. Like I said, like on paper, it shouldn't have worked, but it did. And they knew what they had. They knew what they had was special.
Yeah, because it's kind of like sometimes you do something intentionally outrageous that kind of like dynamites the logjam of creativity, and and yeah, sometimes like it just completely blows up and looks silly, and sometimes it totally works. And of course, that was the great formula that totally worked.
By the way, Nerd Wonder just hopped in the chat.
Oh, howdy.
Yes, she did.
Welcome.
Hello. Sorry, I'm house sitting, so I have to take care of dogs, and it's an interesting process.
Oh, I know that
Hello.
very well.
was-
I've got 3. So, Nerd, since you
I was
hopped
gonna
in.
say my own doggo is.
Oh. But if you want to introduce yourself and talk about a little bit of your work, and then we'll fill you in on what we've been chatting about.
Okay, hey, everybody who doesn't know me, my name is Nerd Wonder. I made a comic called Behemoth War Makes Monsters. The Indiegogo just officially closed today, so we are setting it up for printing. There was a delay because of just grieving. Family stuff happened.
I remember. Yeah, I remember that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really sorry for the late.
No.
The delay, but yeah.
Sure.
I'm getting
You're not.
back into.
You're not the first to show up late. You aren't the first to show up late to this show.
No. And I appreciate everybody who showed up.
I'm at the printing of the comic, but yeah.
That as well.
I always come fashionably late into this show.
It's
I
true.
randomly appear. I am like a cat. I come out when I want to, and I just like magically appear. I can like sneak under doors and stuff. I just do it, man. I just do it.
Just do it.
But yeah, I was
Mhm.
like, oh man, I do have time. I'm gonna go and sneak in here and see what everybody's talking about. There's so much going on with comics. And I love comics. I love all the comics, except for Spider-Man. Spider-Man and I have a weird turmoil relationship of just a lot of abuse. So much abuse.
Hmm.
Spider-Man fans are heavily abused.
That I'm aware of. Corporate comic fans in period are. I mean, trying being a Punisher fan right now.
I think there's enough.
Silver hand telling me to do things that I shouldn't.
I think you could probably. I think there's enough people out there that you could probably reenact that one scene from Venture Brothers where Rusty was in group therapy.
Oh. Any of them, just not the one with the snake and it kills the therapist. But
To be fair, that was all Monarch.
It's true. But Nerd, what motivates you in comics? What gets you making them? What keeps you in the game?
Let's see here. I really love, when I was a little girl, I have always wanted to make comics. It's like, I like drawing and I like telling stories. So you mix the two together. And I love always telling stories and making a fantasy, but I also love drawing. And that never ends. That never dies. As a kid, I wanted to make Sunday newspaper comics. Sunday newspaper comics stopped being a thing. Like newspaper, it's just, they're not really a thing anymore. Well, that never deterred me. Things just evolved and changed. Then I wanted to get into, it's like, that's okay, I'll just make regular comics. and then we see how that's going. But nothing really deters or stops me because I can still do it. There's nothing stopping me. We live in a whole entire new era where independent works have a chance to actually flourish. And in fact, we're living in the time that independent works will become more popular than the high-end stuff at points.
It's
Like
true.
there's a joke that goes on. I love this joke. It's a joke about video games, and it's like AAA company, and they're like, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars just making everything look super gritty and realistic, with every gun and bullet actually firing completely accurate. We spent months and years making every follicle realistic. And so these people better be grateful and spend their money. And obviously, they're going to spend all their money on us because this is what gamers want. Gamers! Ha ha! Funny goose! Goose steals bread! Ha ha! And that was actually
Yes.
real. That was if people do not understand, that was a summary of that era of the world's most popular game of the time, Untitled Goose Game. A random game where you play a goose. And it was incredibly popular. It's an independent project that just shot up. It's like, yeah, you got Call of Duty, but why play Call of Duty when we could play a goose? It's like that with like all this stuff. It's like, oh, do you really want to watch the new Disney movie, or would you rather watch this independent YouTube cartoon?
I can kind of
So there's
attest to that. I can kind of attest to that because, as an example, I have both Fallout 4 and Deep Rock Galactic installed on my PC. Only one of them has over 200 hours sunk into it on Steam. Take a guess
Yeah.
which.
Yep. It's like, ooh, do I want to play Final Fantasy 16 or do I want to play RimWorld for the next 10 hours?
Oh man, Rimworld.
Definitely RimWorld.
It eats
I
time.
was gonna say,
It's a
and then
blessing.
and then like I'm a Linux guy. Like I don't have any Windows machines at home, so like my like that whole space of indie gaming goes back a long ways. Especially I still play Free Droid RPG, which is like you're Tux the Penguin of the Linux world, and you're like fighting Microsoft robots.
That's adorable.
You know, Linux that
Yeah.
is not a user friendly OS, but from what I've heard,
Well,
the trade
It
off
wasn't.
Yeah,
the trade
it's
off
getting
is the trade off you have with Linux that you have opposed to like some Windows or Apple, whatever Apple's OS is. I don't remember what it's called, but the trade off is that you've got endless possibilities with what you can do with it. Like,
Right now, the whole entire thing is that Game Newell specifically chose Linux for the Steam Deck. And they're releasing the OS for other operating systems in hopes of trying to encourage more people to go to Linux. Because if anything happens, Windows has a lot of control and they can take off things. There's been a lot of issues of some companies just taking away things you bought. And that's scary. And so, to the extent they've been considering trying to encourage more people to try Linux, because Linux is
which
free.
is open source.
Yeah,
Yep.
open source. That's what I meant. Yeah, it's open
Yeah.
source. It's hard to get into at first, so that's why their operating system is supposed to be like very easy Linux, like baby's first Linux. So it's like, oh,
Although
look
when
at
you
that.
mentioned this, because I've been using Linux for over 12 years now,
Yeah.
it is true it used to be really hard, and I'll tell you the hardest thing with early Linux, like this is like before 2010 Linux, was getting anything to print. Like printers were nightmares to work with back in the day. But we're actually at the point now that like a number of companies now do Linux friendly equipment. Even Microsoft's gotten into a little bit of Linux themselves.
Yeah, they're pretty
Pretty
cool
much
with
the
Linux.
entire internet runs on Linux. That's the other reason I've gotten into it. But also Ubuntu is actually really friendly to work with now, because like that's the main one of my machines all run on, and it's pretty much like from your Windows machine you can just like create a USB stick on it, right? Install it on your computer, and like it's done. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
And
I've
you
had
get some
good
kind of a
experience with Linux as well. Again, that level of control, even going from Win 7 to Win 10, there was a massive, and then from 10 to 11, the difference in control that I grew up with Windows 95 and all that. Yeah. Microsoft is like, no,
oh no, that's
you
true too.
license
Yeah,
everything. I mean, corporate is trying to balance like not pissing off enough people, but making sure that nothing is owned, everything is licensed. And this, the move to streaming service was a big one. Yeah, and so with comics, I'm a big fan of. I make sure that PDFs are out. I encourage people to share my PDFs if you think people will enjoy it, because at this point, it'd be great if I made money off of each of those sales. But I'd rather people, again, from my point, I want people reading it. If they enjoy it, hopefully, eventually, they will continue to enjoy it and support it in one form or another. And that's again, knowing people read it, massive motivating factor for me.
I mean,
You want to
look
know
at
something? You want to
look
know
at Toho,
something?
right?
You want to know something? That mindset paid off big time for John Carmack.
Oh yeah! Oh my
Anyone-
God!
anyone
id, the start of id and their shareware policies, and I got there was a
Yes.
couple other. Apogee was the other one
Yes.
that was that's
Yes.
what got those companies off the ground, was their shareware
Yes,
policies.
in fact, like everyone thought John Carmack was nuts for even releasing the Doom source code, but he said this on Joe Rogan. Now that source code is free, it'll live forever.
That's the big one. That's the big one.
Yep.
Everybody in the village now knows you. the boobs.
Speaking of which, that's also one of the things behind like anime and its growth and manga as well. Because was it because like Japan also has like the culture of the doujins, the fan comics.
Yeah.
And of course, I think we all know Toho. We all know right, wonderful like Remu with the priestess with the red dress. And like that is a worldwide phenomenon, even though I am certain 95 or 99% of Toho fans have never played any of the games. Because
They're
even
hard
the
to
one
get.
game of that type, yeah, the one that I got was just like some guy I knew on the internet. It's like, hey man, like you want to see Toho? And he gave me one.
I actually won one in a, what was it? Back in the day, I went to an anime convention and I went to one of those. It's like a tabletop. It's LARPing. It's anime LARPing. So you play a character, and people thought I was so fucking. I was so good at playing my character. I won like 3rd place in best character use. No, I think I won best character use altogether. Like there was like a character who like pretty much won the game for everybody. Then there was this, and they're like best use of character. And I think I won just because I was being such a jerk. I was playing Gary from Pokemon, and I was like, must be jerk forever. And they were like, oh,
Yep.
it's Gary. He's here to ruin everything. And I'm like, yes, that is me. And yeah, they gave me as a winning prize Toho on a little CD, and I was like, oh, I heard of this. I want to play.
So before we
Which
stay too
Toho
far
did you
off the
Sorry.
before we stay too far off the rails, because we do have to close this off here soon, I would like, and because this, no, it's I appreciate you. You're here for a reason. Love you folks. The reason I kind of, the last one that this kind of feeds into, that I'm feeling the vibe of, which I love, is and that we didn't bring up much, is the motivating factor of fun, right? Like art as itself as an expression is a wonderful bit of fun. Where do you guys find your fun as a motivating factor within making comics?
If it's not fun, don't make it. Just like how Reggie Fils and me says, if it's not fun, why play it? It's like, this is true, Reggie. If it's not enjoyable to read, why read it? If it's not fun to make, why make it?
I mean, if I don't like what I'm making, why should I expect anyone else to?
Yeah. I mean,
I was
though
gonna say
there's the amazing things of people hating their work, and then it turns out to be their best stuff ever.
That's a big one. I can't tell you how many mangakas have kind of broken themselves over the tables, and I'm sure they enjoyed their work in terms of it, like the process and getting people fed and all of those things, but I don't know how much fun they really had. So for me, again, it's engaging. It's meeting wonderful people like yourselves. It is sharing this passion with a fan base and engaging and seeing what that is. I find so much fun. And fan art is a wonderful motivator we didn't talk about as well. There are so many of these angles that are just joyous and beautiful within comics that, again, this low bar of entry to comics allows for so many different people to express their voices and have those resonate and have that create something greater than what they originally thought. And I find the most fun in all of that coming together into this continuous, and it is a struggle, that just becomes a perpetual loop of I don't know, wonder, of magic, I'll call it. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I think for the last couple minutes here, I'll give us, I don't know, another 10 for the hell of it. It's going a little longer, but folks are here late, so I appreciate, and I'm totally willing to do that as long as folks are willing to stick around. I would love to open it up to questions. If anybody in chat has any questions for any of our panelists or about comics in general, if you got a question about Linux, go ahead and ask that. We'll go a bit more freeform for the end here, but I did want to end on that note of fun being a wonderful motivator for the conversation, because it didn't come up, and I there's so many like important ones and so many different bits, but I think that one is kind of key.
Well, Dusk asked Family Guy. Should we answer that one?
With a question mark? Family Guy. I mean, as a motivator, I mean, I don't want to be like anybody in that show. There's not a single person I want to be like, and that is a wonderful motivating factor. Now, do I enjoy watching terrible people? Absolutely. I don't tend to want to write terrible people except as villains, so that's a thing. But other people, I mean, they can make wonderful terrible people.
I don't ever want to write like Family Guy, because Family Guy writing sucks.
Family Guy has in products that no one has fun making, but they do so because it makes money. I mean, like, fuck, even Seth I think even Seth MacFarlane has practically moved on from it. I mean, like,
Seth MacFarlane doesn't even. Yeah, he just voices in it. They moved everything out of the country to anime to the extent I don't think anybody's really watching. I think it's just left on the TV. Because everybody makes the joke, Family Guy sucks. And so it's kind of like New Age Simpsons. I think it's just on random TVs.
So it's comfort, right? It's a comfortable brand.
It's kind of like how CNN wouldn't exist if it wasn't for airports, right?
Yeah, like, here's the thing. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's just people leave it on because it's just on that channel at that time. It's like, I don't think it's that popular. Like, probably people, I still think people watch Bob's Burgers. I don't know about the other two shows. I don't know about Family Guy or Simpsons. And it's like, dude, nobody watches them because it's just the same rerun. It's kind of like, to the extent, if we really want to be weird about this big superiority or whatever, to me, I'm like, at a point, is it kind of like just DC and Marvel comics that are just trash? Yeah, they make money, but isn't it just because of name brand recognition itself and who makes it?
Again, yeah, it's comfortable.
Sales are only counted by, it's not by people purchasing them, it's for shops buying them.
Well, it's the same problem a lot of, again, TikTok or even YouTube channels have. It's eyes, right? It's just the ads are like, oh, there's this many eyes here.
Nobody knows how many people are really watching. Like,
no.
I was just saying that because the airports, it's akin to that. It's like, technically, these are crap. Everybody knows it's crap. Everybody makes fun that it's crap. The only reason it's really making money is this. And is it even good money? That's the better question. Is it? No. Whatever. And that's why it's like, screw that. I'll just make indie shit for the rest of my life. This is the era
exactly.
Liz asked.
Also, I see like someone's got a Linux question there.
I love it. It's a great Linux question.
Because I don't work with Arch. I'll just say this, dude. Like, go to the forums.
I think it's a joke because he's trying to put it on his Genesis, but
yeah, I know it's a joke, so I'm gonna go in the answer back, which is the correct Linux answer to everything, which is.
I mean,
RT
somebody
file.
might have done it successfully. There are some crazy people out there. Somebody might be running a version of
mean-
Linux on their Genesis. I have no idea.
Why would you do
I
that?
mean, why
That
not?
sounds horrible. I don't even know what you're saying. This magic sorcery sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah,
Liz asked.
That's the
Also,
whole
this
vintage
is great.
computing, yeah.
It's true.
But-
It's true. It's a whole culture. But Liz did ask a great question. How do you feel about the release of incomplete products, which is becoming more and more prevalent these days? I think video games across AAA and indie have been a prolific example of a dishonesty aimed at extracting money from customers. I think that's incomplete products have kind of become again once that monkey's paw had curled, right? Once they got what they wanted, that floodgates opened, and it's probably never closing again. And AAA gaming did open that door, but now it would be crazy and almost unthinkable for a comic book to release incomplete, right?
Can I counter?
Oh, okay.
I'd like to counter.
Oh,
You
counter.
see the floodgates opened, and that people are just going to go play. Like, technically, to me, yeah, AAA definitely does this. Many things definitely do it. But here's the thing. People, the consumers, don't like that, and we complain about it. But that's when a game comes out that actually is fully complete, barely has any bugs, didn't need like mod fixes and no bugs and issues. Like there's a little bit of problems here and there, but nothing too big. Everything that's being added is usually just fluff, just add-ons for other interests. I'm talking about Baldur's Gate 3. Remember Baldur's Gate 3 when that was released and everybody watched it and then turned to everybody else and went, "Why can't you do that?" Like a full complete game. There was there wasn't a 6-hour day one patch to fix every single bug. It wasn't released with horrible, groundbreaking issues. There wasn't like they didn't need to add on extra parts of the story. Nothing. It was a complete game. They didn't need to do most of the bug fixes that they did. They didn't need to add the magic mirror that could change your face. They didn't need to add any of that. They just did it because people were requesting it.
So counter to that is usually those kind of games involve the most ridiculous amount of crunch. And I know that Baldur's Gate did have that. And so it takes a toll, right? There's trade-offs because there are still schedules. They tend to not just be like, oh, whenever it's done. That used to be a thing. It's not so much now.
Objection again. I call objection. Because every other fucking game that comes out with that bunch of bullshit that we
Also
are
has
dealing
crunch,
with,
yes.
like, oh, it's incomplete. Yeah, horrible crunches. Everybody's doing horrible crunches. But the other thing about Baldur's Gate is had less money into that and made a better game than half of the AAA studios. No, more, like all the AAA studios, which is jaw-dropping to the extent, and this is what wanted, this is, and I know you're saying, well, it's got this problem and this problem, but here's the thing. I'm not talking about the issues of making the game. I'm talking about what gamers want. You see, AAA studios think that people want the greatest graphics in the world. But as I've
Oh my goodness, I agree here. I agree here.
Nobody
Like it's not the graphics.
It's never the graphics. Nobody freaking cares. Yeah, like, oh my gosh, you want one of the most famous and most popular games is freaking Minecraft.
Yes. Absolutely.
Nobody cares about stupid graphics. That is a sad excuse.
It's marketing. It's marketing looking at how can we sell this, and they're scared of ideas. They're scared of gameplay.
Yeah,
but if a pretty picture, they ain't scared of a pretty picture.
Problem. That's their own problem. And to the extent I'm saying, yeah, they're like, oh, we don't need to make a full-fledged game. Oh, we can raise the prices so I can get an extra pool. In reality, all they're doing is just opening another. They can open the floodgates, but all they're doing is making cracks to emerge people that'll finally say, they're not going to make the games I want. I'm going to make them myself. And people will go to them. And this is what's happening right now in all these different venues. Like Disney's newest animated movie is even the critics are giving it bad scores. The new Marvel's movie or whatever, the MCU movie is crashing. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to see the same trash. They're expecting you to go see it because of whatever stuff. Nobody cares. Nobody wants that. Everybody's like, instead going like, hey, have you seen that horror ARG on YouTube? It's like that's where people are going. People can go anywhere else to find fun. If you are not going to think about what makes fun and just make trash, nobody's going to come to you. You think that people are very like these people think everybody's complacent. People are not complacent. People dream. People believe and people hope. Be the hope that people want.
I guess if I get any closing words,
Yeah.
there's a there's a Werner Herzog interview that I came across a while back. People who follow me on Twitter might have remembered the clip I posted on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what Herzog got across was that everyone complains about how the studios are so difficult to work with and how they can't get the funding to make their films. And he said, well, do it yourself then. If you make 10,000, 20,000, you've got enough to go and make a feature film. There's no excuse anymore.
Oh man, I mean, one of my favorite reads is "Rebel Without a Crew" by Robert Rodriguez, and how he broke into Hollywood, and basically it's his production notes from El Mariachi, and it's literally him trying to teach the studios like, this is how I get things done. Every step of the way, just trying to say like, no, that's not going to work. You keep ruining what I'm doing, and then just going and doing it himself again. It's wonderful.
And also,
totally
say
recommended
for
read.
comics, this is where the web developer part of me comes in too, because one of the jobs I do is digital marketing, and the cost of entry to digital marketing, just like the cost of entry to get into comics, has really gotten to the point of like, if you wanna find your audience of 100 people, 500 people, 10,000 people, like you can do that now. And the thing is, it's just you just have to do it. And I think this is also the thing we have to remember, that so sometimes also as creators we get into our own like little creator circle, and we forget that there is this whole world of people out there who have not seen any of this stuff yet, who have never heard of any of these indie titles. But like when they see it for the first time, like, yeah, man, like that's really cool. Like I didn't know that you could do that. Or even I've known some people that if you say comics, like, oh, like, are you talking about superheroes? Like, there's so many more stories to be told, right? And and we have to, and I think that's also like one of the reasons a lot of these larger corporations also start putting out a lot of trash. It was the same problem. People got too stuck inside of their own circle, and they start saying like, oh, like, we are the artistes, right? Passing back and forth our amazing art to each other, and just look at my amazing graphics, look at these beautiful cutscenes. And what's funny is that's even one thing you learn kind of early making comics, is that yeah, like you love your big splash pages. But like if you don't have an actual story in between like those beautiful scenes, you don't have a story. Like you don't have a comic, right? You just have a collection of pinups. And
which works for a children's
and
book.
the thing is,
but go on.
Yeah, it works for some, but then you see like then that same concept then gets applied to movies. It gets applied to some of these AAA games, and then like they forgot, it's like, hey, it's got to actually be fun. And then you turn around and in the gaming world, you see cases like, was it like Undertale? Like there's no graphics in that game. Like it's the silliest game, but like it became a worldwide phenomenon, right?
And before that, Earthbound, right? It took a long time. It's similar vibes, and it's just a very unique voice and very simple. I mean, the whole 16-bit age survived on very simplistic graphics, but either compelling story or engaging gameplay.
Which is why
yeah,
it's still
and so
to this day,
exactly
one of the most popular forms to go back to. People sometimes when they're like, I'm making a retro style, but in reality, it's a lot of it is still just to show off what you can still do. It's an art style that is still beloved. Like people are still doing pixel art to this day.
But it's true. When was the last time a AAA studio did a pixel art game? This is just a general question. I don't know.
Yeah.
What Octopath? But
Was
no,
that
no,
AAA?
actually, technically, Square Enix made it, but
Oh,
you are
okay.
correct. It was a small company in Square Enix. It
It was
was
a
a small
publisher.
independent Japanese
They
art.
published it.
That's
The
fair.
Square published it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And they actually, what's funny is they didn't expect it to do well. They released very little copies. They thought it was going to be just a mediocre hit. And but the thing is, what they didn't expect is people fucking love sprites, and
Yes.
they mixed so well sprites in Unreal with 3D backgrounds that still were spritey, so it just felt perfect, and everybody loved it. It would sold out. Square Enix of Japan had to write an apology because they ran out of copies.
Yeah. Well, there you
But
go.
again,
Okay.
Yep.
yeah.
And
The
that
only
is the
like,
age that we're in. Yeah.
yeah. So I think the team, they ended up, I think, just making some smaller, like, I think they made a gacha game out of Octopath, but really, I think the team has now been hired to redo like Dragon Quest and stuff with their engine and their system. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, right on. Well, what I think I will do to kind of close this, and it's just a general motivation. So, folks, all of us are independent creators here. That's what the Creator Roundtable's here supposed to bring us together, right? We started where anybody starts, just with a idea that motivated us, right? And one of the main keys that worked with comics is this boundless horizon, this ability to apply your usually quite large imagination to a medium and actually be able to manifest it into a form you can be proud of and to share with others with a very low entry. So if you are interested in comics, if you have that idea, and I mentioned this earlier in the stream before, I think just Mike was here, the general advice that you will find is how do you get into comics? You make comics. That's how you break in. That's how you get anything done, is you just start. And I hope everybody can find that guiding star to make their art, to find some way to express yourselves, because we do very much need all of our voices here to figure out anything about this world that we find ourselves in. It's a hell of a thing, and for me, what's so wonderful about this space is this boundless potential being utilized by so many different people in so many different ways, and that is incredibly inspiring or motivating. So you can find me at cowboy_steel on Twitter, or you can check out any of our works on IronVerseComics.com. Mike, if you'd like to tell folks where they are and any other where you are, and any closing thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, first thing is you can check out petropatriot.com. That'll take you straight to my Global Comics page at this point. You can also check me out on Twitter, the Catalytic Comics account, or also Substack, which will be in my Twitter bio. And man, I'll just say it again. One thing that's really cool about all the people I'm meeting here is, look, every story is written from the heart. It's written from whatever your life is, and yeah, sometimes it's you're fighting the monster in the story that is also the monster in your life, but also sometimes you're just having a good time, right? Or sometimes like you and your friends kick around. It's like, hey man, like, dude, like, what if we could like create this lady who could like suplex a hippo? And just like ridiculous stuff like that. And that's what the great thing about comics is, like, you get it all. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the stories we all create.
All right, thank you so much, Mike. Brett, if you'd like to do the same.
Yeah. So I can be found on Twitter at Celtic Brett. That I'm there a lot. As far as the Mythoverse goes, there's the official Mythoverse Twitter, just Mythoverse Comics. There's also Mythoverse Patreon, same name Mythoverse Comics, where we're updating every week with new things. It's not sometimes it's changing stuff, sometimes it's other stuff we're working on. There's also the Mythoverse YouTube channel, which Matt and I actually had recorded some Alan Wake footage earlier this week, and I forgot to upload it yesterday, and I should take care of that after the show. All I'm gonna the best place is just either the Mythoverse Twitter, Patreon, or YouTube, one of those three. And as far as my closing thoughts are, the way I look at it is to invoke Werner Herzog again. If Werner Herzog can pull a 310 steamboat over a hill in the Amazon and suffer working with Klaus Kinski to make Fitzcarraldo, a movie that is about a man pursuing an impossible dream and being called mad the entire way. Like, if he can pull that off, what's my excuse?
All right. And the
Yeah.
ever incredible Nerd Wonder, if you'd like to follow up on those.
Thank you. I guess you guys can go follow me at Your Nerd Wonder on Twitter. Hate to say it, my comic has been shut down today. But we may open up a shop in the future with sequel copies when we do volume 2. I guess in the meantime, you want to know what? I'll shout out somebody else. Ben Dunn's Indiegogo just dropped. If you want to go and back that of Tomorrow Girl, or any of these wonderful, beautiful creators, they got all their stuff.
All right.
But yeah, I love comics. I'm never gonna leave. I just yeah, you can definitely see me being very active on Twitter. That's usually where I am right now because I've I've neglected my channel.
As one can do. I've done that much. So yeah, I want to thank all my panelists. Thank you so much for joining. Really taking the time and getting here. I really do appreciate it. I know things have been a little bit off and going. Things have been weird for me, as many people will know. So it's kind of been off and on. If I can do these more than once a month, I will. But at the moment, I'm aiming for once a month. So I will announce it if there feels like a time where I can do that upcoming. So of course, folks, a wonderful audience. Make sure you are subbed if you want to check that out. At Cowboy_Steel is where I engage all the time, and we'll be posting future creator roundtables. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everybody's time involved in this. It's kind of a crazy idea I've been kicking around for a while, and I'm glad we're at least 2 in. So we'll see how many more we can get done here. But yeah, thank you. That's gratitude is the main thing I want to express at the end of these things. So yeah, adios, folks, and catch you next time.
See ya.
All right, we are muted on stream, so you are good. Yeah, I can hang out for a few. At some point, I got to do dinner. But all the animals are passed out, so I'm good.